It's time for the podcast, the Made for Agriculture podcast. Today's Made for Agriculture host is Emily Beck.
And today we're going to continue our journey through the different agencies. We had talked about the Farm Service Agency a while back, and then we went to the Natural Resource Conservation Service. But today we're going to do an agency that's entirely unique to Missouri, which is the Missouri Department of Conservation. Today we have some pretty great speakers here. We have an individual that is with MFA, and then we have an individual that is with MDC. And so we have Jordon Beshears, which Jordon Beshears is, I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. He's actually the district biologist, but his title is a little bit more lengthy. We'll let him explain that. And then we have Matt Hill, which is MFA's district sales manager for East Central Missouri. So thank you both for attending.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, I know Matt Hill kind of sounds a little bit like Sam Elliott today, which I think will just add a little zazz to our podcast. But I'll give them opportunity to kind of explain their job and what they do for Missouri, but also for their region. And so, Jordon, if you'd like to start that.
So again, Jordon Beshears. I'm our Private Land Services District Supervisor here in Central Region with the department. I cover 6 different counties in the north half of the region, include Montgomery, Callaway, Audrain, Boone, Howard, and Saline. I think that cover them all. And I help support our private land program, our private land field staff. We've got 3 private land conservationists, a private land fisheries biologist, and a private land forester. And kind of our primary work objective is to assist landowners in meeting their land management objectives and goals with anything that's fish, forest, or wildlife related on their properties.
So a lot of different private lands there. So you're definitely there for the landowner. I like that.
Definitely.
And I know, Matt Hill, you have a unique perspective for MDC because you actually worked for MDC, correct?
I did, yeah. So right out of college, I worked enjoyable right at 13 years for the Missouri Department of Conservation in the Wildlife Division and primarily in public land management. So our state conservation areas worked with teams to do different management on those, and I've been with MFA for since December of 2017, and had a couple different roles, but right now work with our sales team in East Central Missouri, so our sales experts out there and location folks to make sure they have all the tools and resources they need. Very similar to what Jordon's comments were, to all focused on helping our customers meet their goals and objectives for their operations. So it's one of the reasons I think this conversation is going to be great, is because at the end of the day, we all really have the same goals in mind, just kind of working at it from different angles.
Yep, I definitely agree. I know when I spoke with FSA and NRCS, we had different aspects that we highlighted, and there's a bunch of different things that I think that we need to have agency help with. There's a lot of land coming up for sale. If you're trying to buy back grandma's farm, FSA was a great aspect for that. Or even if you're trying to do different terrace work, or maybe with the new pesticide regulations that are coming up, you're wanting to implement more practices on the farm. But MDC is unique, like I had said in the beginning, because it's solely in Missouri. I don't know who would want to touch on that, but can you explain, how did MDC even come about?
Yeah, so I'll hit on a little bit of that stuff. MDC was originally formed in 1937 as a way to conserve and regulate the resources of the state that were in pretty dire need at the time. Our fish, forest, and wildlife resources were in, real hurt. We didn't have any regulatory authority over harvest or season lengths or limits or anything like that at the time. So basically a group of concerned citizens got together. Then we had the formation of MDC. I mentioned that at that time we started setting season lengths and limits, and started selling permits to harvest critters like deer, turkeys. We started selling fishing licenses, and that was our primary revenue source for like the first 40 years of this agency. And then in 1976, they passed what was called the Design for Conservation, and that set aside a 1/8 of 1% sales tax that goes directly to the agency. That passed overwhelmingly, and I think that just shows how supportive Missourians are of conservation in general. So.
No, I agree. I've definitely talked to a lot of different states, and even worked in Iowa, and I thought that other states had this, but turns out, Missouri is so unique with it, and we have such a diverse wildlife within the state of Missouri, and unique farmers in the state. Even MFA, we went down south and saw the Missouri black bears, sorry, and how they've been able to come back from extinction and things like that. But what other things do we have that can help landowners? I know you guys said that you're very landowner straightforward. So what things can help, farmers or someone that's just getting into owning land? How can you guys help them?
Right. So with that sales tax, we're very gracious to have the budget that we do, and we've got one of the only state-run conservation organizations in the nation that's got a private land services branch or division, if you will. So with that, we've got a number of field staff that go out and do on-site visits with private landowners, whether it's an agricultural producer or a recreational landowner. We've got staff that can go out and help them develop a management plan in order to meet their goals and objectives. Whether that be to increase wildlife populations. So if you're interested in quail, we can put you together or put a management plan together to help address that. Or let's say you're a cow-calf producer or operator, and we can help you with certain practices like implementing native forages to help kind of increase the productivity of your farm. So lots of different stuff that we can do.
Yeah, and I know MFA, we're really doing more with this. With my position and Landry Jones's position, who does the livestock side of things, MFA is definitely someone that's trying to move forward and help landowners with conservation. We have our own native warm season grass mix that's coming on the market. We do a lot with MDC and NRCS with the Native Forage Initiative, like you had mentioned. But I guess I want to ask you, Matt, what have you seen, whether it's with your job with MDC or with your current position, where you've seen landowners really take advantage of MDC and the opportunities that they have for them?
Well, something we could talk about in some length, as Jordon pointed out, the Missouri Department of Conservation has a very deep bench of experts in a lot of different aspects. Not just their folks that are designated, kind of on their private lands team, but they've got a whole lot of teammates, kind of in the background that are experts in all the different aspects of things, to bring those resources to the table, which is great. I guess I just want to zoom out for a minute and just kind of say that one of the main things that intrigued me with the opportunity to go work for MFA was that, as a state conservation department, no doubt MDC is the envy of the rest of the United States as far as if you look at state fish and game agencies. The funding is great, but what the agency does with the funding is really incredible, to build what they have here with both experts, some state land availability, and a lot of different things we're going to talk about too, different partnerships. But 93% of Missouri's land is in private ownership, right? So no matter how many really perfect and great things that I was able to do as a state land manager working for the conservation department, if you made those acres 100% perfect for the fish, forest, and wildlife in those areas to thrive, you're still only impacting, if we did that on every acre, 7%. If you talk about all the federal lands and all those kind of things, right? So to really the thing that drew me to MFA is it was clear to me that until we start making incremental impacts on all the acres across Missouri, that's when we're really going to see some large scale benefits. While we know that a lot of our production land will never be, nor should it be, restored back to 100% natural habitat, because we got to have production acres in Missouri and in the United States to do a lot of things. But if we could just make our acres in production, whether that's row crops or hay and pasture or forest products. If we can just make some, a few percent incremental increases in things that help water quality, reduce erosion, increase habitat for wildlife, those kind of things. That's when we're all going to really achieve our ultimate goal, right? Like Jordon and I talked about, to where helping our constituents, whether that's the farmers and ranchers, the customers of MFA and member owners, or whether that's just all the other citizens of Missouri that depend on having quality environment and recreational outdoor activities around them. So that's, to me, where kind of we're all working the same direction. So some of the key things that I think about are again, just from my current role, is I'm very focused on those production acres. So some of the things Jordon kind of touched on, whether it be riparian buffer zones, and Emily, I think you mentioned it. Hopefully not, but it looks as though we may have some regulation forced upon us to implement some of those types of things, to use certain herbicides in the future, whether that be more native grasses in field borders or waterways or those kind of things. I mean, what may seem simple or small can just have big impacts.
Yeah, I know in a lot of different discussions that we have across the state for conservation, that has been a big topic of, let's make sure that we're implementing the practices that we need to be, that we want to do, like you were saying, for water quality, or, reducing the amount of nutrients that's getting lost in the water or even to our soils, making sure that we're doing that on our own time, in the way in which we want to do it, as opposed of someone coming in and forcing us to do it their way. I know that's something big, and so that's why we are doing these podcasts, is to make sure you guys have that information at hand, that you can do it the way that you're wanting to do it at the time you want to do it. I didn't know if either one of you have seen where maybe some of these have been implemented. I know that, Jordon, you have a lot of different landowners in this area that have been really receptive to conservation and implementing it on their farm. And we don't even have to use the word conservation, but just making their cropping system, a little bit more tailor-made, instead of just the typical row crop corn bean.
Yeah, so just to touch on what Matt was talking about there for a second, I think we all enjoy our jobs because we really enjoy working in that interface between like agriculture and conservation, right? So we all will probably agree that's just like Matt said, that's where the biggest impact is going to be made, is on private lands. And there's definitely a number of projects that we could talk about. There's one that kind of comes to mind here in the district that I work in. And it involves like the CP33 practice through the Conservation Reserve Program. But had a landowner that came into the office a few years ago. We got to talk, and he was kind of depressed, or down in the dumps of his crop yields that year. So we got to looking at some yield maps and whatnot, and quickly noticed that he was experiencing some real yield drag around his field edges where it was bordered by trees or fence rows and whatnot, due to the trees zapping soil moisture and nutrients, robbing it from the crops. But so he came in concerned with that. He was looking at his options. What could he do with that acreage to make it more productive? Because that was getting into his bottom line. He was definitely losing money on that acreage. We're talking a good year, maybe he was raising 5 to 10 bushel beans along those field edges, and on a bad corn year, he was raising 0. So, so we started talking programs, and it seemed like that CP33 program would be a good fit. CRP, as you probably know, is administered by the Farm Service Agency. It's a 10 to 15 year program, which landowners receive a rental payment depending on that soil type of the acres that they sign up. So let's just use a number, say $150 an acre. That's kind of the going average rate in this part of the world. So we installed those field borders, and we weren't like you talked earlier, Matt, we didn't take the most productive parts of the field out of production. We looked at those areas that weren't yielding well, places where he was probably experiencing some runoff, maybe a little bit of erosion, and definitely it was getting into his bottom line. So we planted. Oh, those field borders ranged anywhere from 30 to 120 feet in width. And we planted nearly 5 miles of those on the producer's farm, and which sounds like a lot, but I think it equated to like 15 acres total. So it didn't take a lot of ground out of production, but it by doing that, it addressed a lot of resource concerns. So that was a pretty fun project, and it's one that the landowner was tickled to death to do. He came in the following year after he put the field borders in. We started conversation again. We didn't get just a ton of rain that summer, but he was very impressed with his crop yields that year, and even made a comment that that's probably the best his field averages have been, for as long as he's been farming it. And for me, that's pretty rewarding. And just this past winter, he came in again, and we signed up another like 3 miles worth of field borders on a piece of ground that he recently picked up and started farming. So.
And what kind of blend, I guess, did he put in those field borders and field edges?
Yeah, so it's a mix of native grasses and wildflowers. The primary native grasses were little blue stem and Cytoxgrama, and it was a mix of about 20 different wildflower species. So all those were seeded in the dormant season. He broadcast them with a fertilizer cart using potash as a carrier, and they were planted in late January, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I know that MFA, we're really trying to make sure that when we're looking at your yield maps and even our soil testing that we have through Nutri-Track, that we can see those areas. So if a landowner is kind of concerned, why is there such a yield drag? I mean, definitely go into your, MDC office, but if you are a customer with MFA, we can look at your yield maps. We can also do your soil testing to see, is that the reason why? And we can put other acres in. I mean, if you have where you're having some point rows where it's kind of harder to plant in those areas, I mean, that might be something you want to look at. Or maybe if it's constantly just wet and it's really hard to plant and you're just having that yield drag, like Jordon was saying, that, it doesn't have to just be with the field edges. It can definitely be other places too.
No, for sure. And as I think about those kind of things, just a couple acres of poorly producing areas can really just knock your average yield down dramatically. I mean, I think about it kind of like my college GPA. I mean, after the first semester, it took a long way. It took a lot of work to drag it back up to somewhat respectable level. So, it's if we can identify those areas and absolutely over the long run, it's going to help the overall return on investment by acre improve. By taking those out of production. To me, some of the other low-hanging fruit out there, and to a lot of folks that are going to hear this and say, that's kind of old hat. I've been doing that, or I know people have been doing that for 10 or 15 years. And I'll say that's great, right? That means we're doing a lot of good things out there, but I still see some room to improve. And Emily mentioned it, our system here at MFA is the Nutri-Track program based on kind of high definition grid soil sampling, and then making variable rate fertilizer recommendations to make sure that we're getting the right amount of fertilizer in the right places where the plants are going to use it, not too much, not too little. That's not only helps our customers be efficient with their spend on inputs, but also it helps make sure that we don't just have extra nutrients out there potentially leaching out or running off or things like that. Reduce tillage passages. I think at times there's still places where if for no other reason we've got time and the weather's nice, we'll just go make a pass just to kind of smooth things up a little bit. And honestly, I've seen quite a bit of that here the last couple of weeks. The sun's been shining and it's a little bit too early to plant, but let's just run the field cultivator over it. At the end of the day, probably not a lot of harm done, but still it's exposing, it's breaking up, opening us up to a little bit of erosion potential, whether it be wind erosion, as windy as it's been here the last few days, or if we catch a big rainfall, some of that's certainly going to run off. So, just thinking about how we can keep tillage at a minimum. Cover crops is something that, particularly in this kind of Montgomery County area where Jordon spends a lot of his time, or used to focus more anyway, it's been heavily adopted. In other places, not so much. But I think there's still, a lot to learn about cover crops and in different systems, different soil types, different management styles, and those kind of things. But I think we can say that there's some version of a cover crop that we can work in a lot of situations, and it's always good to look for more opportunities to do that too.
Well, definitely speaking about cover crops, because Montgomery City, you guys had a field day last fall, and I was just blown away with your field day because you invited the agency staff, but you also had farmers there. You had farmers that were integrating the practices on their farms, and then you had other farmers that were interested on possibly doing that on their own farm. And so you were able to hear the struggles. It was really nice for them to have that visual, but also ask those questions. So if you want to, elaborate a little bit more on that and just how those landowners are taking off with cover crops and how they're utilizing MDC.
All right. Yeah, definitely. So I think those landowner workshops are really important. And I think it's definitely necessary to have some of those farmers or producers there who are early adopters of practices like cover crops or installing pollinator habitat or CRP or whatever it may be, so that other farmers can learn from them. I work for a state agency. We call ourselves the expert, but I think, my gosh, there's no better selling point than hearing it from somebody that's actually making it work and making it profitable. I think that's really important. And just touch on the cover crop thing. I think I started to notice an uptick in that about roughly 10 years ago. There were some early adopters. A certain percentage of the county was planted to cover crops, and it has just snowballed since then. So I think it takes some of those folks to, take that risk, if you will, and implement a practice and prove that it works before we can have success with it. So
see that, okay, they're still living, they made it through the hard times, and so maybe I can try it. Right. And I didn't know if you could elaborate just a little bit more on some of the other programs that MDC has, because you guys have so many different things that are accessible for landowners. I mean, you can come into that office and let's say you are a row crop. What kind of things can you help a landowner with?
Yeah, definitely. So all of our private land conservationists, or PLCs, I'll refer to them as, they work out of USDA field offices. So they're working in conjunction with USDA staff like the Natural Resources Conservation Service and Farm Service Agency, as well as the local soil and water conservation districts. And each one of those, all of us organizations, have our own bucket of money to do cost share practices. Most of our cost share is catered toward, more specifically, toward practices that benefit wildlife and fisheries and forest management. We've got a program called the LCAP, the Landowner and Community Assistance Program. There's dozens of practices that we can cost share on. We've got what's called our docket, and it basically lists out those programs or practices that we can provide financial assistance for landowners to implement on their properties. So some common practices there would be things like installing pollinator habitat. We've got financial assistance for conducting prescribed burns, whether that's on grassland habitat or woodland settings. We've got cost share for stream bank stabilization projects. That's where our fisheries biologists get involved. We can help fund forest management improvement practices like timber stand improvement, or TSI. That's a practice which you remove kind of it's like weed in the garden, if you will, in the woods. You go in and remove undesirable or overstocked species to free up growing space for more quality or merchantable trees. They reach a saleable size sooner, and in turn, it provides great habitat, because after you basically break forest canopy, when you're removing those lesser quality trees, you get sunlight down to the ground again, and then you get oak regeneration, and you get flush of native grasses, sedges, wildflowers, those sorts of things. So that's just a handful of practices that MDC can provide financial assistance with. But where I think our PLCs come in, or where we find them particularly handy, is kind of that liaison or go-between when it comes to technical assistance with some of our partnership funding opportunities or programs like NRCS has the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And through that, they can cost share on establishing native forages, all those practices that I described before, like burning, timber stand improvement. There's hundreds of practices that they can provide assistance with, and they've generally got a bigger bucket of money, and we can fund larger projects. Our PLCs are there while we don't administer those programs. Lots of times we're the go-to technical person. So let's say you're wanting to convert 30 acres of your fescue pasture to native warm season grasses. Our private land staff can assist you once you walk into that USDA office, can assist you with finding the best program fit, and then we can write up a herbicide regimen and recommendations for eradicating that fescue, and then we'll come out. It'll help you set the drill and make a few passes with you, get you on your way when you're actually planting that stuff in the spring. So PLCs, they wear a lot of hats, and kind of your one-stop shop on anything that natural resource related.
Oh yeah, and if you need herbicide, you know where to go. MFA.
Right.
But also, you had mentioned this docket. So how does a landowner access that docket? Do they have to go in the office, or is it online?
Yeah, so their best point of contact would be private land staff, like a PLC. They can discuss that with them. In that docket, it spells out what all our cost share rates are, and then the practices which are eligible. Our cost share works on our fiscal year, and they're 1-year agreements or contracts, if you will. So generally, our fiscal year begins July 1 and ends June 30th. So if a landowner is interested in doing any of those practices I had described before, they could meet with the PLC early on in our fiscal year, say July, August. Get signed up for those practices, and then they can do them themselves, or they can hire a contractor to do that work. It really doesn't make a difference to us either way. We put a project plan together along with that cost share agreement that spells out exactly how much financial assistance they'll be getting for doing the project, and then after it's complete, we come and sign off on it, turn it in to Jeff City, and landowners are generally paid in about 2 weeks. It's a really quick and easy process in comparison to something like EQIP, where with that you've got to have a farm and track number first established with Farm Service Agency, and a few more hoops to jump through, but definitely a great opportunity there as well.
Oh yeah, I know when we had mentioned that with NRCS, that was one thing that you need to make sure it's the best for your operation, because it does take so long. But I know MDC, it's so nice to have someone come out and kind of hold your hand if you are wanting to do some of these practices but aren't as secure in doing them yourself. I know whenever I even was looking at my own pond to see, what kind of fish were in there, they actually came out and they shocked the pond and see what kind of species we had. And it was free. And that's what's amazing, that Missouri has this. But another thing that you had talked about is prescribed burn. And so back last fall, I actually attended one of your guys' prescribed burn classes and got certified. And it was a great experience. We'll even have a magazine article on it in May. But I know that Matt Hill was just biting at the bit to talk about some prescribed burn, mild pyromaniac.
Firebug.
Well, yeah. I do love a good fire, and whatever form or fashion that comes in, I guess. But so that was one of the I guess to back up, the area where I was spent most of my time managing public lands down in west central Missouri. There was mostly native grasslands and prairies, so prescribed fire was a very often used tool we had in land management in that natural community type or ecosystem there, as far as removing the old growth, stimulating new growth. and it's just an important impact on that. It shaped that ecosystem over time historically. Wildfire did. So we just did it in a more planned and controlled manner. Preparing ahead of time, fire breaks and only conducting the fires under the right weather conditions where it was safe but also effective to reach our goals. And I guess that's what I would just say, that anytime we're talking about prescribed fire, it's no different than about any other plan or activity you're going to implement. You got to know what your goal is going into it. Whether that is to stimulate new native growth, whether it is to set back maybe cool season grasses, whether it is to try to reduce, maybe you got a bunch of cedar sprouts out there, whether it is to just kind of clean things off and set the table for the next step, whether that's cutting sprouts or spraying invasive species or whatever that is. It's just an incredibly useful tool. It is relatively inexpensive to do. If you spend the time ahead to get your fire breaks all made nice, you don't even really need all that many pieces of equipment to do that. But it is, it can be dangerous, clearly. So it takes, that's why they, NBC and other folks offer trainings throughout the year, each year, to make sure that folks that think they might want to do that have the opportunity to go get proper training so that it can be done safely, not only for their individual well-being, but for all the infrastructure and high value resources around areas that things around our burn area that we don't want to catch fire. So, that's another huge benefit that they provide. In fact, I think to get cost share for prescribed burning, I think it is actually a requirement to go through a burn training.
Is that correct, Jordon?
Yep, that's spot on, Matt. So, and like you mentioned, that workshop that you attended, that's the same landowner prescribed burn workshop that someone would have to go through in order for us to provide them, cost share for the burn, and even to prepare them a burn plan. So any of you CRP producers may be familiar with that now. So if you've got CRP acreage, it requires some mid-contract management. Oftentimes burning is popular for completing that. So in order for us to prepare a burn plan, we first put you through that class, teach you how to do it the right way. It's pretty cool if you've never been to it. There's some online resources that you review ahead of time. It goes over, kind of some of the weather parameters that are safe to burn within, and some of the liabilities that go on with using prescribed fire as a management tool. So we do that as a prerequisite, and then we actually meet out in the field and conduct a prescribed burn. We take our time doing that. We talk about the ignition sequence and how we, the reasons why, we start on this side of the unit, on the downwind side, start with the backing fire, and so on. Then by the end of that, a landowner has gained some confidence and some know-how, and maybe, hopefully we'll have the gumption to go out and try some of that on their own. Prescribed fire around here has become increasingly popular every year. My gosh, just yesterday, I probably saw a half dozen smoke plumes driving home on the way from Columbia. I know our state land managers burned several hundred acres just north of here on our conservation areas. And I saw a couple smoke plumes just near the Montgomery City area that I'm guessing they're probably some of our private landowners were doing those that are receiving some financial assistance. So like Matt said, I'm a big proponent of prescribed fire. As long as you're doing it under safe weather conditions, and you've thought about smoke management, because once you light that fire, you are liable not only for that fire itself, but where that smoke is going to go. So be aware or cognizant of that, and you can do great things. I think one of the most the best parts about using fire as a management tool is just how cost effective it can be. Like Matt mentioned. Let's say you've got 40 acres out there that's grown up into sprouts, after you've got a burn line around it, within an hour or so, you could probably burn that 40 versus if you were to set on a brush hog, that's a lot and try and knock those sprouts down. It may not have as good of an effect, and it's certainly going to cost you a lot more in, time and fuel and labor and all those expenses. So.
I mean, it's definitely another tool in a toolbox. But just like they were all saying, I want to reiterate, make sure that it is safe conditions, especially nowadays with us having such a drought and high winds, that make sure that your area, whenever you're going to do that, is good conditions for it. But
and that's just one more thing on the planning side, Emily. That's why, if you are a landowner interested, I would encourage you to seek us out, have us come look at, your potential burn unit so that we can put a plan together. Because some of this, you get to play weather or learn to play weatherman a little bit. That's kind of one of the biggest deciding factors, whether we should burn any given day, is what the weather is doing. And our private land conservationists, when we develop that prescribed burn plan, we've got a whole list of weather parameters that you must meet before it's safe to go out and actually do that burn for the day. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're fine. I mean, and whenever I took the class, I thought that you all would just show some slideshows. No, they got you in gear. They gave you torches and they gave you leaf blowers and rakes. And no, you stayed there and you learned how they did it, and you actually were hands-on with it. You weren't just watching it. And that's one thing I really like about MDC, like we've discussed through this whole podcast, is that they're very hands-on and they actually get you firsthand experience. Well, speaking about, row crop and, different ground, you guys also have different programs that kind of can manage some conservation coming onto your ground. And what I mean by that is deer encroachment. You guys have different programs for it. You also have the MRAP and the DMAP. And so I sound like Marky Mark.
Oh, yeah.
So if you could kind of explain the differences between MRAP and DMAP. We had a MFA article on it, but I mean, we can definitely talk more in detail on this podcast.
Yep, for sure. So DMAP, the Deer Management Assistance Program, is catered directly towards managing deer populations through harvest. There's some certain acreage parameters that have kind of changed over time with that. You used to have 500 acres or be part of a co-op, which a co-op is just basically two landowners that get together with a common goal in order to be eligible for that. We've got a private lands deer biologist that helps set those harvest quotas. So if you are interested, that's generally the first step, is to contact one of us. We put you in, we get our private lands deer biologist out there, and people are interested in that program for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's crop depredation, and so of course we allow increased harvest through the DMAP program to help take more of those animals off the landscape so they're not eating so many crops.
Have you seen any struggle with that, Matt, with your guys' landowners that you work with, that they have a lot of crop loss because of deer?
Oh yeah, it's that's a big problem in some places for sure. And so I think by and large, conservation agents or whoever else gets involved in that conversation typically are pretty understanding and help kind of put together a plan. But more folks certainly need to look into DMAP, I would say.
Yeah.
I would say to the deer management, from a deer management perspective, there's kind of a threshold there. Like the landscape can support a certain amount of deer, but then due to economic reasons, there's kind of another level there that we want to keep it at. And so DMAP is a great tool for additional harvest of deer. But I would encourage folks to just shoot more does in general. We've become pretty lenient with our permit systems. We've got lengthy seasons. You can shoot a deer from September 15th to January 15th these days, either by archery, firearm, or alternative method season. So lots of opportunity there. Lots of unused tags every year.
Well, and the thing is that, even in North Missouri, we have so many deer. My mom was saying there was like 90 deer out there. She's like, they were just mowing down everything. And I'm like, well, DMAP, that's what you could use it for. But even if you aren't wanting to use the meat, because you can still harvest those deer. I mean, that would be great for youth coming in, or even other folks trying to get into hunting. You can still share that harvest. It doesn't have to be that, you're thinking, oh, well, I have to buy another freezer. That is not the case. So MDC, they have another program that is Share the Harvest. And that is one thing that MFA is pretty excited about, especially for the deer crop encroachment on that. But can you just share a little bit about Share the Harvest? Because I think that just came to an end, correct?
Well, actually, yes and no. So the conservation department in the past, we've partnered with the Conservation Federation, who's helped fund some of that processing. And last I'd heard, we're going to carry on with the program. I think they just needed to get. My gosh, everything has gotten more expensive these days,
yeah.
And it's no different when you take a deer to the processor. So I think when we get some of those numbers a little more in line, I think we'll be ready to roll with the program again. The important thing there would be to make sure and contact your processor ahead of time, because not every locker is gonna accept deer or takes part in the Share the Harvest program, and usually each of those lockers has had a quota in the past, whether it be 100 deer or 500 deer, whatever it may be. So just would encourage you to contact them first. But I know there's a landowner down this other part of this county that's been a member of DMAP, and that's where probably 90% of those deer have gone, is right into our Share the Harvest program.
That's great. Yeah, I know.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah, MDC, they just put out a newsletter just a few days ago that it's been going on for 30 years, and that it started in 92, and that there's been 5 million pounds of meat that's actually been donated to Missourians. So it doesn't go, to other states, and it doesn't go across the whole state. It stays in those communities. So you are really helping feed neighbors. And I think, if I'm correct, that there was about and there's also hogs. Whole deer, I apologize. 5,394 whole deer that were actually donated this past season. So been quite a few deer, but we can do even more.
Oh, definitely.
So a few other things that you guys have going on that we needed to mention is also the Grassland Summit that's coming up, and it's going to be in Jefferson City, and it's going to be April 9th through the 11th. And so if you're interested in any of these things that we've been discussing for native warm season grasses, or even the native forage initiative that Jordon had mentioned, that has been helping landowners kind of get their grassland more established, or converting different grassland. If you're interested in that, like I said, in Jefferson City, April 9th through the 11th is when they'll have the Grassland Summit. And MFA is also a partner with that too. Like I said, nothing but surprises. But is there anything else that you think that maybe we need to dive a little deeper on? Like I said, Missouri Department of Conservation, they have so much that they're doing for the land, especially with that sales tax that we had talked about. And the private lands is everywhere. There's so many different locations that people can go throughout the whole state that is public ground that people can go on and visit their natural environment of Missouri. But is there anything else that you have that you wanted to go dive deeper?
I guess I can't think of any particulars other than just like, for people to know or be aware of, our private land services branch with the Missouri Department of Conservation, and the services that we can provide landowners. We have new folks walk into the office every week, and they have no idea what we do, which is surprising and encouraging at the same time. All of our services are 100% free. I mean, all you need to do is, track one of us down in the USDA field office, or look our contact information up online at mdc.mo.gov and just give us a call. Like Matt said, I think one of the most beneficial things that we can do is come out to your property, take a look around, and put our heads together and put together a land management plan to better your property.
Mm-hmm. And so besides just seeing the triangle, the MDC triangle, do you guys, I'm assuming you have a Facebook page. I know that you also have a magazine that is free, and it's free because of that sales tax. And so you can get on the MDC website. You can subscribe to that. You can also subscribe to their newsletters. And if you're interested in any training that MDC has, you can go on their website again and look up your area. You can look up key dates and key topics that you're wanting to be involved in, and they'll give you the different trainings and when those are, and those are free. So that's always nice. But anything else, Matt, that you have on your end that you really want your landowners to, know more about?
No, I would just summarize a lot of what we talked about today and just say that both MFA, Missouri Department of Conservation, and other conservation partners, again, we've got a tremendous amount of experts in kind of all aspects, whether it be production agriculture for MFA or conservation practices, habitat management, water quality, those kind of things as far as the conservation agencies. And again, what's been great is your position, Emily, and some others as far as kind of being the liaison and kind of opening the line of communication at even higher level between everybody, so that kind of no matter who shows up on the farm to answer some questions or offer some advice, hopefully we're also looking for opportunities to help that landowner, that producer, in other aspects to improve the overall picture of their operation. So and then we can kind of connect the dots behind the scenes and get the right people engaged with that producer. And I think we're doing that at a higher level than we have before. So I just really am glad to see that.
Yeah, MFA is definitely a full service company for sure. And so if you like this podcast or would like to listen to other podcasts that we have, we just had one on dicamba and different regulations that are going to be rolling through. And so if you'd like to look on that, or even like we had mentioned, the FSA podcast, NRCS podcast, you can definitely go on anywhere that you like to view or listen to your podcast. That's where our Made for Agriculture one will be. We also have a YouTube that you can look this up on whenever we have our visual podcast. And then we also have Facebook and any other social media. And then make sure that you also get our Today's Farmer magazine, because we will be having more articles about conservation, but also improving your land with the help of MFA, with those yield goals and those soil tests that we were talking about through Nutri-Track. So make sure that you're following us everywhere and stay tuned for our next podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Made for Agriculture, brought to you by MFA, your whole farm solution.